create your tic-tac-toe board, start by opening Inkscape. Your screen should look something like this. Go up to the top left-hand corner and grab the square tool. This creates rectangles and squares. And start by drawing a square of any size. You can see here where this red dot is. This allows us to change the radius of the corners on our square. We're going to change it manually up top here in the RY column. Just type in the number 1.5 on your keyboard, press enter. I know that doesn't look like much, but when you zoom in, you can see that the corner radius is still there. Next thing that we're going to do is we're going to go down to the bottom left-hand corner of the app, and we're going to double click on this little black box. That should open this fill and stroke panel. You need to go over to the stroke style tab, and we're going to set the width to 0.4. Now there's no good reason to do that. There's no magical reason for setting it to 0.4. It's just that it's going to make the line thick enough for us, and the calculations that we're going to be using for setting up a game board are based on having a line width of 0.4 millimeters. Now that we've done that, go up to the Select and Transform tool in your top left corner of your app. And we're going to set the corner of this rectangle that we've made to the 0, 0, or actually we're going to set X equal to 2 millimeters and Y equal to 2 millimeters. So I'm going to hold down Control on my keyboard, and I'm going to roll my middle mouse wheel, and that's going to zoom out. And I'm going to go to the top up here, and I'm working in millimeters. I can tell because right here, this little drop-down box says mm. And I'm going to come up here to the box for my X coordinate and type in 2. And I'm going to go to the Y coordinate and type in 2. And I want to make this box 82 millimeters wide. So I'm going to set its width to 82 millimeters. And I want to set the height of this box to 96 millimeters. So 96, press enter. And this is the outside shape of our tic-tac-toe board. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to create some pockets for the tic-tac-toe pieces. So again, go back to the square tool and draw a square of any size. It doesn't matter. And we can see that our stroke style is still set to 0.4. But we actually want this square to be filled in with color. And that's because when we're using the Glowforge laser cutter, any shape that's filled in with color is set to be engraved. So the laser cutter burns away the wood and creates a recess. And any shape that is just an outline is going to be used by the laser cutter as either a cut path or a shallow score. So we need to change the width. We're going to come up here to your RY, your corner radius here. Set that to 1.5. Press enter. Go up to the Select and Transform tool. We're going to set it to a width of 22 and a height of 22. I just pressed Tab on the keyboard to go jump from the width over to the height like that. And we're going to fill in the color. So over here in the fill in stroke panel, I've clicked on the fill tab, and here I'm going to click on the flat color option, and that fills in the box. And I don't need a stroke on this. I don't need a cut path on the outside of it. So I'm going to click on the X to say no paint for my stroke path. And I'm just going to re-verify here. You can see that my width and height have changed. So I'm going to just redo that. So there we are. So now I have a shape. It has no outline, so it has no stroke. It's filled in with color only. And it is 22 wide and 22 high. Now, we're going to set this first square to x coordinate 6 and its y coordinate 20. And so that puts that pocket there. Now we're going to need 9 pockets altogether. We could just create 9 squares, but the easiest way to sort this out is to duplicate. So if you come up here to edit, you can duplicate a shape. So as you can see, that's Control and D. So you hold down Control on the keyboard and you press the D key. So we're going to do that. So I'm going to press Control D. And you can see that after I've pressed Control D, it doesn't look like I have a duplicate. But if I just press and hold Shift on my keyboard and I tap on the right arrow key, you can see that my duplicate was sitting directly on top of the other one. So we're going to set the x coordinate for the second one to 32, and we're going to duplicate this one more time. Shift right click, and I'm going to set the x coordinate on this one to 58. And these were numbers that I had predetermined before I set out. So it's just a question of doing a little math and trying to figure out where the pockets should be. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select all 3 of these, and I'm going to group them. So I'm going to come up here to Object, Group, and now I'm going to duplicate all 3 of these pockets at once. So Control D, and I'm just pressing Control Z. So if you do something and you want to undo it, just press Control Z. Okay, so Control D, and go down here. I want to set the y coordinate for this row to 46. And I'm going to duplicate this row one more time. Control D, down, and I'm going to set the y coordinate for this to 72. So now we have all 9 pockets, and I'm just going to hold down Shift and select on each one of them, and that's going to allow me to group them. So up here to Object, Group, and so now my pockets are one group. Now I'm going to come up here and I'm going to grab the text tool, and I'm going to click here, and I'm going to write TicTacToe. I want to change the font size and the font style on this. So I'm going to come up here to Text and click on Text and Font, and that brings up the Text and Font tab. And I'm going to grab the Karumbi font. So it's all alphabetical here. Okay, there we are. And so I click on it, and you can see that the font isn't automatically applied. So I'm going to have to click on the Apply tool here in the bottom right. But before I do that, I actually want to set the font to size 56. So there we are. That's what I'm going to do. And press Apply. So that's what I want my font to look like. I'm going to just roughly center right here. And I would like to tell the Glowforge, the laser cutter, to actually only trace the outside of the font. So the way to do that is I come back over here to the fill and stroke, and I'm going to turn off the fill, and I'm going to turn on the stroke. So there we are. So now I can tell the Glowforge just to trace the outside, the outline of this font. Now, the thing to remember about the Glowforge is that it doesn't know what to do with text fonts. It doesn't know how to process them. So you actually have to convert any words that you've typed out in the font lettering. You have to convert them into a path. So to do that, you come up here to Path and you go Object to Path. And when you do that, you'll no longer be able to edit the text. But this is the crucial step that you need to follow in order to make sure that the Glowforge will actually score the outline of your font. The last thing that we should do is we should come in and we should move the font, the letters around a little bit. So you can see I'm just going to hold down Control, and I'm going to press up on the middle mouse wheel. And you can see that the A looks a little funky here. So we're going to come up here. When you convert a word or a phrase to a path, all the letters are grouped. So we're going to ungroup everything. And we're going to select just the A. Now we have to use the Edit Path tool to do that. So I'm going to come in here and grab just this tool, or just this letter here. And sometimes it's not so obvious how to do this, but there we are. That's the easiest way to do it. And I'm going to press the Alt key and hold it on my keyboard, and I'm going to press the left arrow key. And I'm just going to tap that over. And so I'm happy with the way that looks. And you don't necessarily need to do this, but I'm going to regroup all of the letters again. And the last thing that we need to do is we need to assign separate colors to the outside path, the lettering itself, and the pockets. Now the Glowforge will allow you to assign different cut functions to different colored lines. That's just how the Glowforge works. And so it doesn't matter what colors you use, just use different colors in order to be able to make separate assignments. So I want this outside path to be a cut path, so I'm just going to choose a random color here. I've chosen red. It doesn't matter what you choose. Likewise, I will give the font a different color, so I don't know, maybe I'll just choose green. And notice I didn't add that to its fill. I don't want the font filled with color. I just wanted to change the stroke color on the font. But with the pockets here, I want to change their fill color. So, well, actually, I can just leave them black. So they're different from either the outside cut line or the text score line. So leaving them black is just fine. So at this point, this is our TicTacToe board. And we're done with it. The next step is to send it to the Glowforge. But before we do that, we have to save this as an SVG file. So now just save it to your computer. So go up to File, Save As, and pick a place on your computer to do that. So the desktop is great. Up at the top here, give it a name, TicTacToe, and make sure that you leave .svg there. That stands for Scalable Vector Graphic. If you can't see, you should be able to see down here in the drop-down box, Inkscape SVG. So that's what you want to leave it as. If you don't see it, then go down, click on it, and find Inkscape SVG. And when you're done, press save. Now it's time to make the pieces for the TicTacToe board. So we're going to make our X and O. So go into the app menu, and find Blender and start it. When you do, you're going to find a screen that looks very much like this one. Your version of Blender might be slightly different. If this is the first time that Blender's been started in a while and Blender has updated, you will be asked a couple of questions about whether you want to select objects using the left mouse click or the right mouse click. To get past this little screen here, all you have to do is left click somewhere on the grid and it will disappear. Now my computer is set up right now. If I go into Edit and I go to Preferences, my computer is set up under Key Map to use the right mouse button for selecting objects. So when Blender is set out or sent out in its default configuration, Blender usually has the left mouse button used for or set for selecting objects. And in older versions of Blender, it was the right click. And so I continue to use the right click. So everything that I describe in this video will be based using the right click. Now, this is what the select does. So this is this weird pyramid shape here. This is a type of camera. And to select it, I'm going to right click on it. And you can see it turns orange. And up here is a light. And again, I can right click on it to turn orange. So when I say select an object, I mean right click on it, because that's how I've got Blender set up, to create either an orange glow or to make the entire object seem orange.
All right, so now that we've got the basics out of the way, if you're not familiar with how to use Blender, I'm just using the scroll wheel on my mouse. That's the middle mouse button. So press down on the scroll wheel and you can rotate the screen like this, and you can scroll in and out. And if you hold down Shift at the same time as pressing down on the scroll wheel, you can pan left or right. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to delete the light here. So right click on it to select it. Again, if you can't right click to select this, then you have to go up to Edit, Preferences, click on Key Map, and then if you would like, you can click on right here to be able to follow along with me. I want to get rid of this light, and the easiest way for me to do it is after I've selected it and made it turn orange, I'm going to press X on my keyboard. It's going to ask me if I want to delete it. I'm going to click on the blue delete word, and it's going to disappear. Same with the camera. Right click on the camera, press X on your keyboard, and choose delete. The first thing that we're going to make for our TicTacToe board is the X. This weird circle here that has a dotted outline of red and gray, that's called the 3D cursor. The 3D cursor is useful, but we're not going to do much with it for right now. If it's in your way, you can left click somewhere on the grid and it will get out of your way. So make sure that the cube is selected. So right click on it, make sure you've got that gold outline. And we're going to zoom into the cube a little bit. Now if you look to your number pad, this only works if you've got a keyboard with a number pad. If you're using a laptop that doesn't have a number pad, then you won't be able to do this. You'll have to find a different way, and I can help you in the lab if I'm available. What we're going to do is up here in the top left hand corner of the screen is a drop down that says Object Mode. So you can see that little drop down triangle there. When I click on it, I've got Object Mode and Edit Mode. I don't care about the rest. I'm just going to be working with these two. So I'm going to select Edit Mode. And when I do that, you can see that the cube changes slightly. Now there's a shortcut on your keyboard to go between Object Mode and Edit Mode, and that's just the Tab key. So if I press the Tab key, I can go back to Object Mode, and if I press the Tab key again, then I can get to Edit Mode. So that's currently where we are. Now I'm going to actually jump back into Object Mode. I need to change the size of this cube, and up here you have the compass. And right beside it is a very small little arrow poking out the side of this window. This window here is called a viewport. And that's just Blender terminology when you're working in a 3D modeling environment. So you go up to that tiny little arrow there and you click on it. And if you do it just right, this panel will pop open. And if you're not clicked on that cube, it shouldn't actually matter much. Let's see. Yeah, so once you click on the cube, though, those numbers could change. So right now, my cube is 2 units by 2 units by 2 units. Now, I realize that the M means meters, but we're going to clear up that confusion by removing the M. So I'm going to come over here, and you can see this little picture of like a circle and a cone. I'm going to click on that. I'm going to click on units, and here it says the unit system is metric. I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to choose none. So that's going to help clear up some of the confusion. So this cube is now 2 units by 2 units by 2 units, and it's 2 in the X number line direction, 2 in the Y number line direction, and 2 in the Z number line direction. If you're looking at the set of instructions for making your TicTacToe board on page 3, I provide you with some information about how big your starting cube is supposed to be. So your cube is supposed to be 20 millimeters by 20 millimeters by 5 millimeters. Now, I've just confused you because I've told you that I don't care about the units right now, or the measurements that we're using. The truth is that 1 Blender unit equals 1 cubic millimeter. So if I measure 2 units, then it's 2 millimeters. So right now, this cube, the way Blender is showing it to us, is 2 millimeters by 2 millimeters by 2 millimeters. So I want to make it 20 millimeters by 20 millimeters by 5 millimeters. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the X dimension, and I'm going to change that to 20. I'm going to click on my tab key, and my tab key is going to bounce me down to the Y dimension, and I'm going to change that to 20, and I'm going to press tab again, and I'm going to go down to my Z dimension, and I'm going to choose that to change that to 5. And now I'm way too close to the cube, and so my entire screen has been filled up by it. I'm going to use the scroll wheel and zoom out just a little bit, and now we can see the cube. Now, again, if you're using one of the big computers and you have an actual keyboard and that has a number pad, the 7, 9, 1, and 3 keys on the number pad are very useful. When I press 7, it gives me the top view, and you can see here in the top left-hand corner the word TOP. If I click on the 9, that's something useful too. You've got to have your arrow right over top of the grid, or it doesn't work. So if I press on the 9, that gives me the bottom view. If I press on the 1, I get the front view, and if I click on the 3, I get the right view. Now, you'll notice that the cube is sitting below this green line. Now, if you're wondering what this green line is, if we come up to our compass here, you can see that the Y number line is actually the green line. The X number line is going to be the red line, and the blue number line is the Z number line. So I would like to set the cube right on top of the green number line, and so it might be a little bit confusing, but the thickness of our cube right now is 5 Blender units, which is the same as 5 millimeters on the 3D printer. So I would like to move it up half that distance, right? Because right now half of the cube is below the green line and half of the cube is above the green line. So half of 5 is 2.5. So I want to move the entire cube up 2.5. And the easiest way to do that is I come over here into the location part of this transform panel, and I click on Z because I want to move it up. The blue number line is the up direction for right now. So if I change the number on the blue number line, then my cube will go up on that number line. So if I change it to 2.5, and I press enter, the entire cube jumps up on that blue number line. And now if I hold down the middle mouse button, if I hold down that scroll wheel, I can see that it now looks like my cube is sitting flat on the ground. But that's just our human brain trying to make a ground where there isn't really a ground. Okay, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to divide this cube up a little bit. And in order to do that, I need to go into edit mode. So I'm going to press tab on the keyboard. And there's a lot of tools here on the left hand side. I'm going to grab the loop cut tool. And you can see that the loop cut tool creates these outlines that sort of show up. And just depending on where you hold your mouse, that slice line will show up in a different place. So the trick about the loop cut tool is that once you can see that outline, you use the left mouse button to click, but you hold down that left mouse button. And then while you're still holding that left mouse button down, you can actually drag that loop cut off to the side. So I'm going to do that again. I'm going to loop cut and slide over there. So now you can see this might actually be easier if we go into wireframe mode. So up here, top right hand corner where my mouse pointer is, you can see a circle that looks like it's made out of lines. If I click on that, you can see right through the cube now. So you can see the lines that I've made. So I'm going to actually loop cut it through the middle now. And I'm going to move that loop cut over here. And I'm going to move this loop cut over here. And we're actually going to change precisely where those are in a minute. But for right now, this is just useful. And I'm going to loop cut it right in the center here. And then I'm going to loop cut the long way here. And it gets a little bit confusing because there's lots of loop cuts in there. But now, if I select them all, I'm going to press A on my keyboard. There we are. So you can sort of see that better now. This is how I've divided up the cube. Now to deselect everything, I'm going to press A 2 times. There we are. And I'm going to come back up here and I'm going to click on the select box. Just because I don't want to have the loop cut tool out anymore. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to move around some of these loop cuts. So if you're looking at the bottom of page 3, for part B on page 3, I talk about where the first, second, third, and fourth loop cuts are supposed to be. So to select a loop cut, we need to have our edge selection tool. So if you see where the pointer is here, this one selects a dot or a vertex, this one selects a line, and this one selects a face. So we're going to click on the line selection, and I'm going to hold down Alt on my keyboard. So I'm holding down the Alt key, and now I'm going to right click on this edge line right here. And there we go. And you can see that it selected the entire loop. Now if you don't hold down the Alt key, and I'm going to press A 2 times to deselect, if you don't hold down the Alt key, all that happens is you just select one of the edges. But by holding down the Alt key, you can select the entire loop. So let's do that again. So there we are. We've selected the entire loop. Now, I want to move the loop. Now, if we come over here to the transform panel, we have a global transform and we have a local transform. So the local transform is sort of like a number line that only goes the distance of our cube, and the global number line is like a number line that goes from 0 to an infinity, and it measures everything in your world or in your scene. So you want to be on global number line, and so that's what I've clicked there. And so for the bottom of page 3, B1, we are clicked on this edge loop, and I've said that I would like you to set your X position here to -5.5. So click on X and type in -5.5 and press enter. Oh, and let's see. So I pressed Control Z there. Oh, and the reason that happened is because I am actually looking at the wrong side of the cube. And you might have made the exact same mistake as me as well. So we're going to rotate this guy here so that we're looking at the X number line. Remember, the X number line is the red number line here. We can tell that up there. So so as long as your X number line is the one that's straight across your screen like that, then I'm going to right click, grab that. There we are. That's the one that I actually wanted. And I'm going to change this one to this one's going to be 5.5, and the reason for that is I'm looking down the wrong side of the X number line, so I'm all twisted up here. So this is probably really good practice for you because you probably got yourself all twisted up, just as I did. So there we are. This, by the way, is the move tool, the move and transform tool, and you can actually use the move tool to actually move your edge loops once you've selected them. So that's kind of useful. But it's really important that you grab right on the edge of the arrow. And if you do grab the wrong part of the arrow, just like I did, Control Z puts you back. Okay, so now that we've got ourselves all sorted out here, I'm going to go back to where I think I should be, and so that's over here. There we are. So we're finally in the right spot. So if you didn't get yourself twisted up, good for you. Here we go. So I would like this one set to -5.5. Press enter. There we go. And hold down Alt. Grab the other one, and this one is supposed to be set to 5.5. Press enter. Good. And now we're going to rotate slightly over here, and we're going to grab this edge loop up here. So we're going to go all the way up to the top here, and we're going to grab this edge loop. There we go. And for Y, we're going to set that to 5.5. And we're going to grab the bottom one here. So hold down Alt, click on it, and this one's going to be set to -5.5. So there we are. So we have now adjusted those lines, and we still need to adjust our center lines. So I'm going to hold down Alt, click on my center number line, or my center loop cut there, and I would like the X for... I'd actually like the Y. I'm going to change the Y. So the Y for this one should be set to 0. There we go. And now I'm going to grab this one here that goes through the center this way. So hold down Alt, click. And this one's going to move along the X number line, and I would like that one set to 0. So there we are. That's what it looks like. Now, if you're a little bit confused, you might have to pause the video, go back, rewatch a few parts, but you'll get yourself to the point where this is what yours looks like as well. All right. So just to orient you, the X number line is horizontal on my screen, and the Y number line looks like it's vertical on my screen, and my Z number line, actually, if you look at it in the right direction, is going straight up. Okay. So now we're going to move on to page 4. And on page 4, for part V or 5 and 6, we've already done that. We've set our Y's and 0, so we're going to move on to part C. And we're going to do some vertex, or we're going to merge some vertices. If you have, these are the dots. So come up here, top left-hand corner of your screen, you've got your vertex selection tool. You click on your vertex selection tool. Each one of these dots is a vertex. Now, if you have more than one vertex, they're called vertices. So when you hear me talk about a vertex, I'm talking about any individual dot. If you hear me talk about vertices, I'm talking about more than one vertex being selected. All right, and what you just saw me do there was it's called a box select. So you can just use the left click on your mouse, and you can just draw a dotted box around whatever you're working with, and they will all be selected. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to use the number 7, and I'm going to see if I can actually come up here, and we're going to look at the viewport. And so for those of you that are using a laptop that doesn't have a number pad, this is how you can choose your 7, 9, 3, and 1 keys. And so I'm going to choose 7 right now. So if you've got a keyboard with a keypad, you can choose 7, or you can come up to View, like so, go to Viewport, and click on Top. That's what we're looking at. That's what your screen should look like right now. And the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to, and I'm going to prove to you that when we box select, we're grabbing more than one vertex at a time. So here we are. In the top view, I box selected two vertices, and you can see that they're both selected. So I'm going to press 7, and that's going to get me back to where we were. All right. So if you were looking at page 4, part C, we're going to start with part 1 there, and we're going to slightly move some of these vertices, and I give you the coordinates that I would like you to set for each one of these 1, 2, 3, and 4 positions. So just watch and follow along. First thing that we're going to do is we're going to box select these vertices here, and then up here in our transform panel, we X is set to 0, but we're going to set our Y to 4.5. You can see right now that it's 5.5, so we'll set it to 4.5, and when I press enter, you can see it moves in towards the center dot a little bit. Okay, so let's go down to the second set of vertices. There we are. And I'm going to set this to 4.5. And you can see that Y is already set to 0. Now, if your Y isn't already set to 0, that's because you missed a step in part B. So in part B, in substep 5 and 6, we set the Y and X to 0. So if your Y and X for these vertices that we've selected aren't 0, it's because you missed that step, and you'll have to go back and redo those. As you can see, I just randomly clicked a vertex there, so I'm going to Control Z to get out of that, And I'm going to go back. I'm going to box select that collection of vertices here. And I'm going to set that to -4.5. Enter. There we go. And select these vertices here and -4.5. Okay, so you now have, I'm going to select all of that. So it makes it a little bit easier to see this. Here we are. And this is how your cube should look right now. So just double check to make sure that the vertices have been moved like this, because if you haven't got this part right, you're going to have trouble with the next step. All right, so now that you've got that correct, we are now going to merge some vertices. When we merge vertices, we basically squish them together and just make them into one vertex. So we're going to start with the outside edge here. And I'm going to right click on this vertex. I'll zoom in here a little bit so you can see it. Not too far. So I've right clicked on this vertex here, and I'm going to right click on the vertex right beside it. And it's really important that you click on them in this order because of the choices that I'm going to make when I do my merge. So let's do that again. So this is my first vertex. This is my last vertex. And I want to now merge these vertices. So I can come up to Mesh, and I can go to Merge. And you can see I can merge at center, I can merge at cursor, at first, and at last. Well, I want to merge at the last vertex that I've clicked. And notice also that there's a little M here. That just means that I can press the M on my keyboard, and I can jump straight to this choice without having to come up here and click on Mesh. So I'll do it this time. Click Merge at Last. There we are. So this looks slightly confusing, but what's happened is that those two vertices have been merged together, squished together. So now I'm going to come to the bottom here, and this is where you're going to have a little bit of practice as you're moving around in Blender. I'm going to right click on this vertex. I'm going to hold down Shift. I'm going to right click on that vertex. I'm going to press M on my keyboard, and I'm going to choose At Last. Now if I go click back on 7, and I go back to my top view, you can see now that I have sort of pulled in on the edge of this cube. Okay, so hold down Shift and hold the middle mouse button and move up. We're now going to go through this. We're going to do the bottom now. So, gotta be careful. You want to make sure that you move your geometry or you move your mesh in a way that you can get a nice clear view of the vertex you want to click on. So click on this one, hold down Shift, click on this one, press M to merge at last, grab that vertex, hold down Shift, right click, M at last. So you can see, not that hard when you practiced. Let's come over here, right click, Shift, right click, M to merge at last, right click, Shift, right click, M at last, and now we just have to do the top. And as you have more practice, your brain just starts moving around the scene that you're looking at without you thinking too much about how to do it, because it just becomes an extension of how you think. So here we are. We have now created an X. Now this X isn't actually all that interesting right now because it's kind of pointy, and it's gonna have trouble fitting inside the pockets of our TicTacToe board a little bit. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna round the corners on our cube. Press A 2 times to deselect. I'm going to come up here and grab the edge selection tool. So right here, click on that, and I'm going to right click on this edge. Now, there is a tool called the bevel tool. And if I hold down Alt on my keyboard and I press B, nope, that's a box select. Control B. Yeah, it's Control B. So hold down Control and press B, and then you just move your mouse a little bit, and you can see this weird rectangle that shows up here. And what's happening is that this is cutting off the edge of your square, of your X. And this will look better if we add more faces. So what I want you to do is I want you to push the scroll wheel on your mouse up, and when you do that, you get more faces on your bevel. And you don't want to add too many. Like 4 is fine, and you don't want to go all the way to the edge like that. Go about just a little ways in like this. So you can see I have a nice rounded edge to my X now. Now the problem is that you'd have to do that 4 times, and computers are really good at doing repetitive things for you. So I'm going to press Control Z to undo that. But this time what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold Shift, and I'm going to select, I'm going to click this edge, hold Shift, click this edge, hold Shift, click this edge. And now that I've got all 4 edges clicked, I'm going to go Control B, and I'm going to pull my mouse, and you can see that I'm adding a rounded corner to all 4 corners of my X at the same time. So get it somewhere around like that. It doesn't matter. It doesn't need to be perfect. It's just something like that. And then when you're happy with where it's at, press the left mouse button, and that will commit those changes to your X. So at this point in time, we are now done making the X for our tic-tac-toe board. And I'm going to come back over here to the top right, and I'm going to click on viewport shading, and there's my X. And if I press tab on my keyboard, there we are. I can go back, and that's what my X looks like. And then later on, we're going to send that to the 3D printer, and you can print it out in plastic, and that'll be part of your tic-tac-toe board. Now the last thing that we need to do, we've got our X, but we also need our O. And the O is actually quite a bit easier to build. So we're going to use the 3D cursor here, and I'll show you a shortcut here in a second. What we need to do is we're going to move this X out of the way. So over to the left-hand side, click on your Move tool, and grab just the end of the red X mover here, and just move it along. And now you can left-click in the center here, and that'll put your 3D cursor more or less in the center. If you want it to be really precise, you can come over here to the Transform panel and click on the View tab. And here is the location for the 3D cursor, so you can actually set it to 0. So 0 tab, 0 tab, 0 enter, and now your 3D cursor is right back at the center of the world. Now what we're going to do is we're going to add a new mesh. So we can go up here to the top, we can go Add Mesh Cylinder. I like to use a keyboard shortcut for that though, so I like to hold down Shift and type A, and that gives me the exact same add menu. And here I'm going to select Cylinder. And here in the bottom left hand corner is the Add Cylinder Properties panel. So click on that, and here we can change some things about our cylinder. And our cylinder has to be 20 millimeters across. So that means that if it's 20 millimeters across, it means that it's a cylinder or a circle with a diameter of 20, which means that it's going to have a radius of half the diameter. So the radius is going to be 10. So I'm going to type in a radius of 10. There we are. And you can see how there's little edges here on the circle. It's not a perfectly smooth circle. Well, that's the number of vertices that make up the circle. So if I was up here and I clicked on the viewport shading and I turned that off, you can see that my circle is made up of actually a bunch of squares all connected together. So here, the number of vertices will set how smooth my circle looks. So if I click on vertices and I double the number of vertices I have, so from 32, double that is 64, and press enter, you can see now that my circle looks a lot smoother because there's more faces that make it up. Our depth is going to be how thick the circle is. So our X has a thickness of 5 units. So we're going to make sure that our O has the same thickness, 5 units. And we're also going to make it sit flat on the ground, even though that's not really what it is. We need to change its Z location. So again, its Z location is going to be half its thickness, so 2.5. There we are. So it's now sort of sitting on the ground. I'm going to go back to shaded mode. So that's what our cube looks like, and I'm just going to collapse that for right now. So here we have the outside shape of our O. And if we wanted to confirm that the dimensions were correct, you could come back over here to the transform panel, click on item, and you can see our dimensions are 20, 20, and 5. Now we need to make a hole in the center of this cylinder. And that turns out to be pretty simple, actually. Back into wireframe mode, the 3D cursor is still sitting at the center. So I'm going to go hold down Shift, tap A, and I'm going to go back here and then create a new cylinder. And the new cylinder is created with all the same properties as the old cylinder. Now what I want is I want to make a cylinder with a diameter of 10 millimeters, which means that the radius is going to be 5 millimeters. And for reasons that I'll explain in a minute, I'm going to double the depth of this. So I'm going to change it to a depth of 10 millimeters, and I'm going to change its location. So its location is now going to be 5, which is half of its height. So there we are. We're going to look at it edge on. Let's move that back to 0. 2.5. 2.5. That's what we want. We'll keep it at 2.5. Here we are. And I'll show you what I've done here. If I go back into shaded mode, you can see that this new cylinder is just above and just below this bigger cylinder here. And that's what we want. And the reason for it is we're going to use a modifier. So, and this is really important, you need to right click, you need to select the large cylinder first. If you don't select the large cylinder first, this is where you're going to make a mistake, and this becomes a little bit more complicated for you. So when you're sure that you have the large cylinder selected, come over to the right hand side and you'll see a little picture of what looks like a wrench. Click on it, and this is the modifier panel, and click on the drop down and you will find the Boolean modifier. So click on Boolean. And now if you're using one of the Mac laptops, this can be a little bit hard to see because everything is sort of see-through, and so it's hard to figure out what you're looking at. So just be calm and careful. You can make it work. And this will be particularly challenging if you're on a Mac laptop. So right here, there's the word object has this white square. You want to click in beside that white square, and you're looking for cylinder 001. It should be pretty easy. It's going to be the only other cylinder that's there. So click on it. And the last thing that we're going to do is right here, there's a little picture of a camera, and then there's a little picture of a drop-down triangle. Click on that, and you will find the word apply. And you can also see that just pressing Control A should also work. So I'm going to click on apply, and the modifier disappears, and you want that to happen. That's a good thing that modifier just disappeared. The reason is if we come over here to this panel, we haven't talked about it yet. This is called the scene outliner. And in the outliner here is cylinder 001, and there's a little eyeball here. And if I click the eyeball, you'll notice that now the big cylinder has a hole in it. And what we've created is the O for our TicTacToe board. And so, right click on it. We now have the game pieces for our TicTacToe board, and it's going to be, we just need to print them out on the 3D printer, and you're going to print 5 X's and 5 O's, and that's what you need. To get your X's and O's ready to be 3D printed, though, we need to save them in a file format that the 3D printer actually knows how to use. So we're going to come up here, make sure that you have either your X or your O selected. Come up to File and go to Export, and under Export you'll see STL. So click on STL, and before you do anything else, come over here where it says Selection Only and click on that. It's really, really important that you do that. If you don't, you're going to have a whole mangled mess of objects and geometry, especially with your O. So now that you've got Selection Only checked off, we need to make sure that we are saving it to a place where we'll be able to find it. So let's come over here. We want to save it to the desktop. So here in the system panel is desktop, and you can see that right now it's going to be called untitled.stl. So I'm going to click on it, and I had my O selected, so I'm going to type, I'm just going to put the letter O, And I don't actually need to type .stl. The system, when I click off to the side, the system will add .stl for me. So now I'm adding o.stl to my desktop. So here we are, export. And I'm going to do the same thing with my X. So right click on my X, file, export, STL. And it's red because I already have an o.stl. Well, I just need to change the name. This is my X. X, click off to the side, it adds .stl for me, and click on export. And when I go to my desktop, then I will be able to see these two files. Last thing that we need to do then is we need to load your X and your O up into the Matter Control software, and the Matter Control software is what is used by the 3D printer to actually print things out.